All right, I think we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Um, we really appreciate your time. Um, we know it's a very busy time of the year for growers in California, especially. We're in the middle of harvest right now for many different crops. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Um, so as you know, Travis is going to be presenting today about early tree irrigation management. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic along to Travis, who will be presenting. And also, just so that you're aware, if you want to ask some questions, feel free to use the little uh, Q&A section at the top right-hand corner of your screen. You can pop in your questions there, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible towards the end of the presentation. Thank you once again for taking the time to be with us this morning, and I'll pass the mic along to Travis.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Travis Goldman, and I'm the Irrigation Management Advisor for Wartal. Thank you, Nick, for bringing me on this morning to talk about early tree irrigation management. In today's webinar, we'll be talking about the best irrigation management practices for establishing and developing young orchards. We'll be comparing different strategies, as well as analyzing these strategies in a 3-year vegetative growth study in Nonpareil almonds. At the end of the webinar, we'll open it up to questions and be more than happy to answer any. I'm sure everyone's familiar with our 3 pillars of agronomy. Without proper irrigation, we cannot meet the genetic potential of our orchard. Proper irrigation optimizes our crop water uptake while minimizing our downtime of being too wet or too dry. In this situation, it's going to help us reduce pest and disease issues that can be resulted from over or under irrigating. And overall, what we're trying to do is we're trying to mitigate our long-term repercussions of stress. When looking at short-term repercussions of stress with a crop, it's easy to look at if we miss an irrigation during cell division or cell expansion or during nut fill or maybe a post-harvest irrigation. But when we're looking at the vegetative process of establishing an orchard, it's the little small shortcomings that what can happen is end up basically reducing our overall size of our trees. As well as these short-term repercussions, there are also long-term repercussions for these little bits of stress. When we're looking at transpiration and water uptake from our soils, it really starts at our leaf surface with hydrated guard cells and open stomata allowing water vapor pressure to be released from the leaf. As water vapor is released from our canopy, it helps to create that partial pressure and that force that's required to remove water from our soil particle. At this point in time, with this partial pressure, we're able to passively remove water from the soil and have it go through our vascular structure of our tree. During our best management practices with well-hydrated soils, we're able to create an optimum range for both our fertility program to be picked up and through the issue of mass flow. As soil moisture depletion begins to increase, that physical property of removing water from the soil particle also increases. It becomes more difficult. What ends up happening is that this compromises our partial pressure, and the stomata begin to close down to retain turgor pressure within our leaf and within the overall vascular structure of our tree. This is what we consider downtime as well. As far as with best management practices, we're trying to make sure that we're maximizing photosynthesis. And the way that we can maximize photosynthesis is making sure that transpiration is continuing throughout the day as the tree ends up picking up water. During dry soil conditions with high soil moisture depletion and high soil tension stress, stomata have to close to retain turgor pressure until water is reapplied to the field. At this point in time, it's a stress situation and photosynthesis is compromised. In looking at a soil tension response curve, we know that transpiration rate, if we were looking at that on the y-axis, is optimized in a comfort zone, where we're considering our blue band or our optimum range for water and nutritional uptake for our plant. If we get the plants too wet, transpiration rates are compromised, just like what we would see in a dry zone. In relationship with this physical force to remove water, low soil tension results in higher moisture availability, whereas high tension numbers will result in low water availability. And kind of looking at what does 0 kPa look like, the easiest answer that I have for this is that we've created mud. Water is not the limiting factor, but is definitely going to be a compromising factor at this point in time because it's depleting our oxygen within our root zone. As far as looking at this, we are filling up all of our macro and micropores with water, and oxygen is no longer present. At this point in time, when establishing trees, we were trying to make sure that we were minimizing this amount of time to make sure that we provide the adequate conditions for vegetative growth on the top and as well as in the roots. As far as looking into a farming procedure, we know that there's an optimum range where water and oxygen are at the best condition. In Hortal, we call this the blue band, or also known as our comfort zone. There's a good balance between both water and oxygen for the roots to pick up water as well as expand. It improves transpiration rates and as well as it improves the nutritional uptake of our plant. The biggest thing is that it does not create downtime for the vegetative growth of our crop. In Hortal, what we're looking at is both wet and dry soil conditions, and it kind of looking at when does water stop becoming available to a tree or any other crop that we're looking at. In the examples below, we can see an example at 500 kPa where it resembles a lot like a hard-packed road just after being watered and driven over for a couple days, kind of like a blue groove. But the biggest thing to really see is as we start to reach that permanent wilting point, that's at 1500 kPa. At 800 kPa, we start to see our essential nutrients, in this case SOP, come out of solution and start to produce a precipitate in the soil. Let me use my arrow and I can identify where the SOP is. Right there. So this grower applied an application of SOP about 3 weeks ago, and it stopped at the wetting front. And as the orchard began to go through a dry down, it began to show up as a precipitate. So that's a significant stress point as far as with any type of management. We want to make sure our nutrition is in solution. And the big factor as far as when establishing an orchard, are we waiting until we cause stress? And the answer is no. We're trying to take on a proactive approach by mitigating any of these shortcomings of being too wet, or in this case, too dry. And kind of coming back to this soil tension response curve, if we look at when we're going to want to turn the water on and off, it's clearly within the blue band because this is optimizing our rate of transpiration and the rate of nutritional uptake. If we get below this, what you'll start to see is that we're starting to approach field capacity, which in California is between 2 and 3 kPa. If we exceed this, we're exceeding the holding capacity of our soil and beginning to create mud in a fully saturated situation where you start to run into both hypoxic or even anaerobic soil conditions. On our opposite spectrum, as we exceed our comfort zone, we start to get towards a situation where we're going to begin to start to see plant stress. If we exceed this any further, we can even reach the permanent wilting point of that orchard. At Hortal, we're using soil tension, the physical property in which the same thing that a plant has to overcome is that force to remove water from the soil particle. When establishing an orchard, I like to start off with managing your early part of your root system, where we're going at 12, 18, and 24 inches. In this example, I'm using a 12-inch soil tensiometer to monitor my lateral water movement towards my plant, as well as my 18-inch soil tensiometer to measure my lateral expansion, making sure that I don't have any type of preferential flow or any potential for or causing of issues of not getting water to the plant. At 24 inches, I'm using a tensiometer to track my leaching fraction, or my point of where I know that my root is going to be basically developing its taproot. Where's the depletion going to be? In this example, it's in drip, but as well as any type of establishment with an orchard, with either a fan jet or a micro sprinkler, any type of overhead coverage.
I'm going to stop you for a second.
The same type of
Just want to
pattern is
remind
going to be
everyone,
used
if
to
you guys
mitigate
have
any
any
type of
questions, you can use the Q&A section at the top right-hand corner to type in your questions, and we'll try to answer them maybe on the spot or at the end if it's more appropriate.
That's good. Nick, you mentioned that. I'm already starting to see a couple questions fill in already, so this is good. Thank you for your guys' interaction. When we're monitoring soil tension in real time, it's like we're monitoring a heartbeat of our field. We know that when we're within the optimum range in our best management practices, we're creating strong transpiration rates, and they kind of correlate kind of like a strong heartbeat if we were to monitor that. In this graph right here, this is just me explaining the difference and kind of what's happening as we look at a soil tension curve. Looking at this, we can see that on our y-axis, we have KPA. So as in, what we just were talking about, low KPA means high water availability. With high soil tension, we're going to start to see a soil moisture depletion. And we know that there's a blue band in which transpiration is going to be optimized. Kind of going from left to right in this example, use my cursor, you can see an irrigation event identified right here. In this situation, this field was irrigated for 9 hours and 16 minutes. The water started to percolate through the soil profile, rehydrate the soil, and drop our soil tension with water being now available. At this point, we start to see the plant consume water through transpiration and starting to see these gains through a period of time from October 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and 25th. At low tension rates, we have a strong heartbeat and transpiration is at 100%. As we move further past this optimum range, transpiration is beginning to be mitigated as hard cells start to close down the stomata and regulate water loss. If we look at all three lines, they're the representation of our soil horizons at 12 inches in blue, our 18-inch soil horizon in green, and our 24-inch soil horizon in red. At the end of this illustration, you can see that there was another irrigation for 19 hours and 21 minutes to help rehydrate the soil profile. Diving further in, low soil tension resulting in a heartbeat, strong heartbeat. When you're looking at larger transpirational gains in this best management practice within this comfort zone, within this ideal range. But what we also see is that if we begin to get the plants too wet, we have a moderate to low rate of uptake. This is seen after the irrigation event, highlighted with the light blue arrow right here. And we can see that it takes multiple days before the tree begins to get into that optimum range. Once it gets within that optimum range of 10 to 40 kPa, for instance, on this growth stage of the orchard, we start to see an increase in the rate of consumption of water, a relationship of higher tension for the shorter amount of time. As we begin to exceed the physiological ability of the plant to remove water, transpiration begins to be mitigated. And at this point in time, we're starting to see shallower transpirational gains as the plant begins to shut down. This not only affects your top soil profile, but also at your deeper soil monitoring depths. We can see between our 18 and our 24, shallower gains, and whereas they start to continue. what we're starting to see is this flat line or shutting down of our root system. We're starting to regulate water uptake. In today's webinar, we'll be discussing 3 leaf stages for establishing almond orchards right now. We'll be going over our first 30 to 60 days right after planting your potted trees. We'll be going over summer irrigation management after establishing these trees and looking at improving vegetative growth and carbohydrate sequestration before their very first dormancy. During our second year, we're going to be looking at our spring water management as well as our summer water management in comparison to different irrigation strategies. And last, we're going to be looking at our third leaf, summer water irrigation management, and looking at the overall correlation between high compliance and low compliance. For my first 2 months of establishing a potted orchard with double line drip, I like to keep the lines fairly close to the crown to make sure that I'm getting water towards the potting material and supporting the low holding capacity of that potting material until that tree's roots can expand out into the soil that we're going to be growing the tree in. At this point in time, I'm trying to minimize mud. A big factor in establishing any type of plant, if you over irrigate it, if it's a row crop, guess what? It doesn't, you have a low stand, it just doesn't even grow. With trees, you can hurt a lot of trees by over irrigating them and creating these hypoxic and anaerobic environments. A big thing I really want to hit home with is just a little extra water can really get you into trouble because you're slowing down the metabolism of that tree. You're slowing down the overall vegetative growth on top as well as your root expansion. Regardless if you're using double line drip or if you're using a fan jet or a micro sprinkler, I'm trying to manage these trees above 5 kPa and making sure that I'm below 25 kPa before this young tender vegetative growth starts to shut down. During this period of time, you can have different types of strategies. Some growers, they want to irrigate once a week because it's easy. And other growers are taking a more proactive, best irrigation management practice to meet the crop water demand that the orchard requires. In both of these examples, we have a low compliance field, which what I consider low compliance is it's below what I would consider the best irrigation management practices. We have high compliance, which is a field that is essentially meeting everything that what we're trying to do on our irrigation pillar. During this time, these potted trees are both irrigated for roughly the same amount of total hours within this 2-week period, but one is basically irrigated once a week and the other one is spoon-fed water. In our low compliance example, the field is turned on for 8 hours and 10 hours. What ends up happening is that we're exceeding the field capacity and creating mud and slowing down the transpiration rate of our trees. What this is doing is it's slowing down photosynthesis, it's slowing down just the overall vegetative establishment. If we look at this, it has a shallow heartbeat. It's taking 6 to 7 days just to get up to 10 kPa. That plant is not doing well. If you're thinking about it volumetrically, it is not consuming a lot of water. Looking at our high compliance field, you can see that this grower is applying anywhere between 3 and 4 hours and 5 hours of water. And what that's doing is that they're simply applying water that the tree is consuming. They're allowing oxygen to enter into that root system and allow that tree to expand vegetatively below the soil surface, increasing our surface area of our root system and helping out with nutritional uptake. Throughout this whole procedure, they did get a little bit dry, but overall, you're seeing strong transpirational gains with high, increasing tension every single day. This is exactly what you want to see, is very active roots as you're establishing this orchard. Going into what I'm trying to do as soon as I see the growing tips of this young orchard expanding out to the edge of the berm, I want to begin to move my drip hoses away from the crown of that tree to try to minimize the amount of water that's getting onto that crown and getting onto the trunk, causing potential issues with weeds, harboring different types of potential issues with just getting the wood too wet. As well as what I'm doing is I'm chasing my root expansion. And what I'm doing here is that I'm creating, you can think of it as a larger reservoir, a larger gas tank. I'm creating a larger wetting surface area to create the ideal condition for root expansion. At this point in time, we know that we have a larger canopy, and that canopy is a little bit more robust. And what that means is that that partial pressure is able to be, expanded a little bit better because it has, more leaf surface area. It has more vapor pressure leaving, therefore it can remove water at a higher tension level. At this point in time, I really want to make sure that I'm moving my trees from 5 to 25 to 10 to 40 kPa after the first 60 days. I'm still trying to make sure that I am not creating mud. I'm simply meeting the water in versus water out for this orchard. Same thing, do not over irrigate your trees. Looking at this 2018 planting in the late season, we're looking at September. So we're going through pollinator harvest. And you got to figure 24 hours of water on the low compliance double line drip field is 6/10 of an inch. Once a week, it's easy. You've got other things you have to take care of with doing short shots on pollinators, making sure that you're irrigating your nonpareils, any of your self-pollinating orchards, making sure that they're not going without water. It's a very busy time. At this point, the low compliance field began irrigating once a week for between 22 and 16 hours. Because it's easy. Turn the valve on in the morning, and turn it off the next day. Turn it on in the afternoon, turn it off the next morning. But what this is creating is excessive downtime, also leaching fractions. If we look at this from left to right, we're looking at 11 hours of leaching fractions, which guess what? Our fertilizer is going outside of our root system. Next one, 7.5. Next one, 6. What we start to see is that, as well as if you look at this orchard, it looks sick. It looks like it's just not doing too well. And in this case, the owner said it looked like it's dry. The canopy just was not retaining any type of turgor pressure. And at the end of the week, he just said, I can't take it anymore. I got to apply water. At this time, too, if you dug into the root system, the root system was very much held tight, still close towards where the potting material was, and it really didn't expand out where it was supposed to be. Looking at our high compliance, our best irrigation management practices, the same grower is applying 5 to 9 hours, 9.5 hours of water. And what we're seeing is a lot of root activity at 12, 18, and 24 inches. These trees are aggressively removing this water, and we're having to simply apply water. It's taking off. So, it uses 4.5 hours of water. If we were to come back in with this aggressive root system that's really robust and it's expanding, and you hit it with 22 to 24 hours, guess what? You're going to be in the same situation as your low compliance field because you're going to create anaerobic or hypoxic soil conditions where the tree's going to have to rebound after this stress. Let's see. As far as here we go, we're going to go into my 3-year research project on Nonpareil orchard with new plantings that started in 2018. These were planted within 5 days of each other in April. If we look at our high compliance field on the left, much larger canopy, much larger trunk compared to our low compliance orchard on the right. If we were to take a volume in which we take the circumference and the scaffold height from the crown, we have a significant difference in vegetative side. As well as if we're looking at our fall irrigation applications, we have much higher carbohydrate sequestration before dormancy in our high compliance orchard compared to our lower compliance. What this stored energy really means coming into our second leaf is that you just have so much more pop. If you could look at the high compliance orchard, tons of vegetative growth, strong leaf development, and if you look at the trunk, and both stakes are the same size, except for the one in the high compliance is just ginormous compared to the smaller, I guess you can call it a popsicle stick, on the second leaf on the right. What this really kind of tells a tale is that there is a much larger vascular structure in the higher compliance orchard compared to the lower compliance orchard. Looking at our second leaf early season irrigation management throughout our late spring, what you're seeing is that the higher compliance orchard is requiring more water because it has more vegetative growth, it has more robust root system, it has an increased surface area in the roots, which means higher nutritional uptake and higher water uptake as well. This orchard is having to be irrigated every fourth or fifth day with 16 hours. Anything over 18, you begin to accumulate leaching fractions, and you can really see kind of after a longer irrigation, and I'll point this out, you notice that the downtime, we had 2 days of downtime because we applied almost 30 hours of water. If we look at our low compliance orchard, we're still kind of on a strategy where we are just simply not applying enough water, or not applying enough water, but we're applying too much. We're still seeing shallow heartbeat where it barely gets up, kind of comes through, gets up to about 15 kPa after a week. Grower irrigates for 10 hours, takes the tension, puts the root system into an anaerobic soil condition, and really hurts the trees even more. Instead of letting these trees take off and utilize the water that's available, what we're doing is we're now compromising our trees because we're essentially saturating every single time we irrigate. As far as you drive around on a hot day, they look terrible. They just, didn't really retain any type of turbo pressure from the canopy, despite having, water available. Looking into late summer, that same type of strategy with what we consider our low compliance field, best irrigation management practices still to spoon feed these trees with 16 to 14 hours every 4 or 5 days just to match the crop water uptake. What we're seeing is a once a week application again during the second leaf stage in this low compliance orchard where it just gets 24 hours worth of water. Under a normal situation, we would hope that it would be consuming 6/10 of an inch of water once a week. But what's happening is that because we're compromising our transpiration rate of the tree, it's not consuming it. It's just too wet. It simply won't take it up. Looking at December 2019, as far as the high compliance orchard, they were able to make sure that they were simply spoon feeding these trees and making sure that they were building stored energy before dormancy. They retain their leaves a little bit longer than the low compliance seen on the right hand side. And if you look in here, I have my soil auger and you can kind of compare the size. Overall, if you look at what we were able to do, we have essentially tripled our vascular structure size so that your circumference of your trunk in relationship to the scaffold height in our high compliance orchard compared to our low compliance by second leaf. Significantly larger frame, these trees are going to do significantly better through any type of wind or type of storms. They're not going to fall over, as well as when we're looking at our third leaf, we're hoping that we're going to be able to shake these. Going back to stored energy, if we look at our high compliance orchard on our left hand side, you can see a beautiful frame, lots of leaf push. At this point in time, the orchard is going through cell division. It's already past pollination. And you can look at what we consider our low compliance orchard to our right. At this point in time, the orchard, what we consider our low compliance orchard, has a weed mat on the top to help reduce weed pressure, as well as they added a micro sprinkler to help out with frost. just for preventative measures. But both of these orchards are still being irrigated with double line drip. Looking as far as I'm still going to call it a low compliance orchard. This orchard did a complete turnaround as far as with the irrigation strategy, looking at spoon feeding these trees and making sure that they are not over irrigating. They did a fantastic job this year, and as far as with following irrigation recommendations and simply applying the water that the tree is utilizing. In a side-by-side analysis, we see that our third leaf orchard that has high compliance is consuming a larger volume of water. It's supporting a larger net crop, it's supporting a larger frame, and overall we would assume that it's going to require more water. At this stage, you're seeing irrigations anywhere from 17 to 21 hours of water, whereas the best irrigation management practice for the low compliance orchard is still anywhere between 10 and 6 hours of water to meet the weekly crop water demand. As far as in July, I went through and did basically more measurements and came in. The biggest factor is that our low compliance orchard in 2020, seen right here, pointed out, its size is still nothing comparable to our second leaf orchard with proper irrigation. It's going over best irrigation management practices to support that third pillar to make sure that we're meeting the genetic potential of that orchard. To look at that, to realize that right here from 2019 or 2020 on our low compliance is the cubic inches of that trunk is there. It's crazy. As well as I was hoping that there was going to be a larger gain as far as with the higher compliance that we saw with spoon feeding these trees at this point in time, where we only had a 1.99 increase compared to the high compliance that still stayed at 1.96. What do these trees look like? In July 2020, our high compliance orchard, massive trunk circumference compared to our trees that were hurt for the first 2 years and got back on track on year 3. Here's my soil auger kind of relationship with just trunk size. You can see that the high compliance orchard is significantly larger compared to the low compliance, as well as I started taking scaffold circumference measurement in 2020, and you can see just overall scaffold size. The frame of our high compliance orchard is super robust. It's going to shake extremely well. As far as the orchard that was kind of compromised in the low compliance, they're going to pull it this year. Here we are, side by side. Used arrows to kind of point out where my same soil auger was in both images, and you can see just the sheer frame of these trees, just significantly larger. And they're planted the same week in 2018 in April, and you can just look at the difference. And here we go. If you look at this, as far as this frame, Nick was really nice to do a little bit of photoshopping and put the augers next to each other, and you can just see how much the high compliance dwarfs that low compliance orchard. And kind of in conclusion, what I really want to say is, despite being on the best irrigation management practice by year 3, the long-term repercussions of stress in year 1 and year 2 significantly hurt that third leaf orchard.
Awesome. Good, very good stuff, Chavez. That's impressive. So I think we're going to move on to the question and answer section. I saw we did receive a few questions, so I'll go ahead and I guess ask you the questions, and if you want to answer.
Okay.
So we got a first one from Mike. He's asking, do these best practices apply to cherry trees?
They do. So with establishing any type of orchard, especially stone fruit orchard, um, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we're optimizing our vegetative growth state, especially for cherries, and making sure that we're not getting them too wet. Because as far as with uh, establishing any type of orchard, even vineyard, you're going to see a ramp up and a ramp down in the transpiration rate in which they're going to be, creating vegetative wood. They're going to be transpiring. They're going to be, they're going to be using energy. In using soil tension, we can really match simply what the water is being consumed. But as far as for cherries, yes, the same type of theory of matching the transpiration rate of your tree in mitigating stress is there. And, it's part of my job. I do it on a yearly basis.
Nice, nice. Thank you. Uh,
I think kind of bringing it back to the three pillars of agronomy. So if we're supporting a really good fertility program and a really good integrated pest management, and we come in and we knock it out of the park with proper, irrigation, um, those are your three limiting factors as far as we would hope that it would increase yield, but overall, if we're providing those three pillars, we should hope basically to optimize that crop for that year in relationship to the circumstances. We can't make bees pollinate. We can't make sure that things get harvested, but overall, we can definitely help out with supporting the overall crop that's being developed that year.
nice. Thank you. Thank you. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Let's see here. So I think you touched base on it quickly, but maybe you can give a little bit more detail on why we are.
Oh yeah. I jumped right past that. I'm just so excited to talk about trees and how they're growing. So when we're first establishing an orchard, we're trying to make sure that we're in the highest density for our root system, 12, 18, and 24 inches. And then as that orchard begins to develop and becomes what we consider more of an established orchard, like at year three, and really depending on, when of course it's planted, but even maybe at the end of year two, we're moving it to 12, 24, and 36 inches to make sure that we're not leaching anything past that large root system, as well as we're making sure that we're getting water to where water needs to be. So yeah, thank you, Nick, for bringing that up. Because yeah, year three, we moved these sensors to 12, 24, and 36 inches. Thank you for bringing that up.
Very cool, very cool. And I think we have a last question from Aaron asking, so I'll read it out. In your example, you showed the effect of overwater.
Yes. So as far as with this example, I could have easily just said, oh, well, this grower didn't irrigate, and of course we would all assume that the tree wouldn't grow. And in this one, I wanted to take in. I have two extremely good growers that I wanted to look at two different irrigation strategies, and it's stuff that I didn't say, oh yeah, this grower is clearly over irrigating by 48 hours. These are very comparable things that I've seen throughout the valley. And like I said, both of these growers had fantastic fertility programs, fantastic integrated pest management. They both had clean plants. It was easy. The simple factor was one was properly irrigating with what we consider our best irrigation management practices, and the other one was just putting a little bit too much. That same factor, as far as if you are under irrigating, you're shutting off transpiration and shutting down photosynthesis, and you're going to start to see shorter, more stunted plants. What ends up happening is you start to see kind of lignifying ends on the growing tips of your canopy, and ends up just basically you end up with kind of short, squatty type of plants as well, just kind of like with over irrigating.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that pretty much covers all the questions we got. I don't know if anyone has last minute questions, maybe. I'll give you some time to type it in if you want, but yeah, thanks, Travis, for this webinar. I think that was great. If you guys have any questions that we didn't address or want to hear more about specific topics, you have our contact info right here on this slide. We'll leave this on for the next 15 minutes or so, so you can take the time to type it down. Feel free to ask us any questions, send us email, give us a call, and we'll be happy to hear you. So thank you so much, Travis, and hopefully we'll do
Yeah,
this again
definitely.
soon.
Looking forward to doing a couple of my projects in wine grapes and in cherries. So, guys, look forward to those.